Ignatius Press and the Augustine Institute present the Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter. If you like us, please help us by subscribing and by reviewing us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you might listen. And don't forget to sign up for weekly updates and study questions at formedbookclub.ignatius.com.
Welcome back to the Formed Book Club, where we continue to discuss the music of Christendom. Let's announce right away, though, that we're taking a Christmas break until January 3rd. Thomas, our extraordinary technical support person here, is going to make a retreat in Europe. I'm making one here. And of course, Vivian has all the family Christmas things to do, as you do as well, I suppose, most of you. Anyway, we'll be back on January 3rd. We're going to continue this conversation, but I would like to talk a bit about the book in general. Now that we've had a few chapters, we're going to start with chapter 3 here today. And I want Joseph and Vivian, your comments on this. It seems to me like this book, which is a history of music, is a valuable and important book, but I would kind of divide it into kind of two, not sections, but two kind of dimensions of each chapter. It goes through the history of music, actually, and Western music, and its origin in Psalms and Gregorian chant and so on. But then as we get into these chapters, it kind of focuses on a particular composer with very detailed information about birth, death, and what people thought about him. And it will take one work and go through every movement and tell you it went from B flat into C sharp and then so on, which for me anyway is more than I can understand or appreciate. But I can think that this book is a guide for those who want to understand the breadth of the musical tradition that really originated in the church. That if you want to go to one of these composers like Haydn, or you go to Verdi or something like that, you could take a work and use this book as a way of going through a major work. But as far as an overall history of music, only those parts to me which kind of delineate the historical movement are of general value, I would say. But I mean, would you comment on?
I would agree. I mean, I don't have the musical vocabulary. So when she starts getting what I would call technical, in other words, when she starts assuming that people can read music and understand that sort of notation she's using, I'm lost. But, I'm happy to be lost in the sense that, that I've written a history of Catholic England, that the more you know about England and Catholic England and the history of England, the more you'll get out of it. But if you know nothing, you're still going to get, hopefully, a lot out of it. It's going to be a good introduction. So for me, this is an introduction. When you start talking about, C sharp and altos versus sopranos and whatever, then I skim over it because it's beyond my ken. But I'm glad it's there because it's not beyond everybody's ken, right? And there are people that are more au fait with music than I am, and they're going to get a great deal more out of it than I will, and I'm happy for them. And if it wasn't in here, they couldn't. And in fact, it would be sort of like a dumbed down thing for them, which now it isn't.
Vivian,
I'm having a similar experience, right. And if I had more time, I would do the book justice and try to look up some of these things as well. And listen to them. I think really, I would like to go back actually and listen to some of these pieces, because when she describes a piece that I already know well, just from listening, not reading music, then I then can appreciate more what she's saying and go, oh, wow, she's really describing the experience of listening to this piece of music. I should listen to some of these others as well. So, yes, it's one of these things where, take what you find helpful and maybe dig deeper if you want to learn more and, Yeah,
and I think that to progress, because, we, even old people like me, we're born with all this music already there. We've got concertos, we've got symphonies, and plus we got folk music, we've got jazz, and we've got bluegrass, and all these things were already there. But to see how it developed and how the church is so important in the development of it, that to me is worthwhile. I think we should all know that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure I know the difference between a fugue and a concerto. That's how ignorant I am. But it's very, very useful to have this historical development. This is when the concerto comes in. This was the first major opera. This is the first opera house that was ever opened. I mean, so you're getting this panoramic overview of the development and history of the music of Christendom that I think is it's eye-opening for me, because this is an area of history I know very little about.
The other thing that I find interesting is when she is showing you who are contemporaries of the particular musicians.
Yes.
So, for example, to bring in El Greco on a chapter of, we might not get to today, but, that this was to music as this was to art. And now to see these two people as contemporaries and realize how culture, first of all, culture is not a static thing. It's a thing that's always changing, and it's both shaping you and being shaped by you at the same time, right?
It's alive. It's alive.
It's a living thing.
And that passage about El Greco, I actually also highlighted, because, I mean, again, if we don't have the vocabulary, then analogy is a means by which we can enter into the music, right? So I noticed that. I think it was Bach and El Greco, but I might be wrong.
No, it was Victoria, De La Victoria.
Victoria, yeah.
Well, and also on that point, the analogy, she brings in the analogy of architecture too, of Romanesque, and then Gothic, and Baroque, and how the music and the art and the architecture all
fit together.
Yeah, and develop together,
Yeah. And,
I mean, to me, it's a wonderful reminder of the riches that we've inherited,
That's right.
And therefore the importance of preserving them and not canceling them, if I may say so. Because let's face it, have we talked about any composer yet who is not a white European male?
We're about to. Hildegard von Bingen, a woman. But
she's white European.
But at the same time that we talk about preserving the...
How does she identify? Oh, go ahead.
He's getting into trouble.
He's incorrigible, isn't he? He's incorrigible.
Yes, he is. But this preserving of culture, it's important to understand that culture is not a static thing. That we don't want to cancel beautiful and good things. We want to keep them and not throw them away. But that doesn't mean we want to
preserve them in amber.
Or fixed music in this fixed place. Because if we had, we wouldn't have this huge patrimony of all of this beautiful music. It would be still the Psalms as sung by Jesus and Mary, and that would be that. So culture does change over time. Now, sometimes, though, the change can be a de-evolution, right? It can be a degradation, whatever.
And there's a limit to change, because the point is, yes, the way that we present the Psalms, the way that we put musical settings to the Psalms has changed. But please God, we're trying to stay as close as possible to the solidity of the original Hebrew in translations, etc., so that we're not sort of losing the authentic.
That's the words. That's the text. She's talking about the music.
And I'm not even talking strictly about sacred music. We're talking about concertos and operas and symphonies.
I agree, but you were talking about the word culture, which is broader than just music. So I just wanted, it's not just a question of clarifying, because there's something that's alive. I like the metaphor of the tree. It's alive, but there's certain aspects of what the tree is which is unchanging, right? Even as the aspects of it are certainly changing.
Right. But just by way of contrast, that part of the Nazi project was to fix German culture in a particular way, right? Yeah. And so as if you could make this static thing that would just stay the same and everything else would be weeded, pruned away, and you'd have this pure German culture. Okay. So we want to be open to the development of things and the changes in things that are not degradations of those things, not decay of those things, but by the same token, we wouldn't have opera if music hadn't gone through this historical development. Right?
Absolutely agreed. But we have to understand Shakespeare as Shakespeare understood himself, and not as queer theorists understand.
Well, that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. So the point is that some sorts of change are illegitimate. So as long as we make that distinction, I have no issue at all.
Well, but let me bring up this topic, which is very much related to this. I mean, some things grow, I would say, asymptotically. For example, the speed by which we can travel. You walk, and there's a horse, and there's a car, and there's a plane. But, once you reach the speed of sound, we've had the same maximum speed of normal airliners for the last 50 years, because at a certain point, you can't go any better. Or you take internal combustion engines, which are probably on their way out, but you get your efficiency goes up 85%, 90, 92, 93. But at that point, you never get to 100. And I'm just wondering, those are bad analogies for something which is cultural, but we have all these beautiful music developments, from chant and, and polyphony, and then symphonies and concertos and so on. But will there be an infinite progression, or will we at some point reach, if we haven't already, where there's no place else to go? There's only 12 notes in the scale. Which
is why you have innovations such as dissonance, which no one wants to listen to, which is some sort of mathematical engagement with the notes, which is very beautiful.
That's a devolution, I would say. Go ahead.
I am resisting this analogy, because with these different motors and engines and so on, you're talking about an improvement in speed. Okay, yeah. Which is, this goes faster than this, and this goes faster than this, and this goes faster, and there's some outer limit of what was physically possible or whatever. But the constant variety in human endeavor, in whether it's art or literature or music or poetry, whatever it is, to say that there's some fixed place, and now beyond that, well then let's just all pack it up. We're done. We're done then.
Metrics, which would be a good analogy with the musical note annotation, the scale, which I don't understand, but metrics I do. Those laws are laws, and you can either abandon the laws and not have poetry.
I'm not talking
about. You have to abide by the laws and still have poetry. So there's a natural limitation even within development.
But that's not the kind of limitation he's talking about, that there's some ceiling, that now we can go no further. I would hate to think of human endeavor and human inventiveness and creativity being just done, because all that could be done has been done. That's a different. I am sorry. I'm pushing against this idea.
No, that's good, but I want to say, I do think that we live in an era, and it started before we were born, even before I was born, that the idea of history is progress. It's moving towards something better, something greater, et cetera. And
I'm not talking about that.
No, but I'm saying that's the atmosphere we breathe, I'm saying I am trying now to relearn the banjo, okay? And I'll never get good at it for a bunch of reasons, which won't go in here. However, I doubt there's going to be a piece which is better than dueling banjos as a banjo piece.
I don't see how you can say that.
Or the Foggy Mountain Breakdown.
I'm sorry. I'm just resisting
If I could just change the subject and be on topic but off topic, I'm so pleased to learn you're taking up the banjo again. I have some very, very fond memories of the campus at Ave Maria with you strumming your banjo and us all hanging out, singing songs that we knew, and I had no idea you put it aside, but if you had put it aside, I'm very pleased to hear you've taken it up again.
Well, Vivian, I agree with you that there's not only the Holy Spirit, who is a principle of surprise and renewal, and also the human spirit, which participates in God, is always able to do new things, different things. But somehow, in terms of form, like he talks about metrics,
I'm not talking, I'm just saying, what we can do with words and notes if you mention God and His Spirit, who's infinite, by the way, and I'm not saying that we have infinite capacities either, but
well, you do in a sense.
But to just put this lid like we're just done. I mean, I'm sorry, that's how old people talk. We're done.
No.
It's
I'm
over.
not saying we're done.
That's great. Has already been done. There's nothing more.
Let's use an analogy. I'm actually going to agree
Thomas,
with you,
help me out here. You're a young person with a future. I mean, come on.
Don't say anything, Thomas. Go ahead. If you want.
Vivian, I want to use an analogy to support what you're saying. So one of the things that we sometimes use to justify Darwinian evolution is the fact that if you gave it long enough, then that somebody by pure chance that Hamlet would be written, right? Just by all the various things coming together. First of all, I'm not convinced of that, but the point is that Hamlet being written might be beyond the Darwinian probability, and that's one play. So in that sense, of course, that human creativity has endless potentiality, but within finite forms. But that doesn't mean that Shakespeare's written plays, that other people will write good plays, but there'll be plays, or they won't be plays. If they're not plays, they've gone outside the form, there's something else. But so there's a limit, but that limit is relatively speaking, limitless. I mean, we will see, as long as there are people with creative gifts from God, we will see creative things being done that are beautiful, that aren't exactly the same as any creative thing that's been done before, although derivative up to a point, because there's a living tradition, and we can't create ex nihilo. So we're making things from other things that already exist. So it's going to be part of this living tradition, but it's got to be new in that limited sense, of being derivative of the tradition. But it's still going to be a manifestation of the individuality and the brilliance of the creative gifts of the artist.
I think that might be a possible reconciliation here. That
I think that's a
certain forms have reached. We've reached the form. Having 13 notes instead of 12 is not going to help anything. But within the 12, there's all sorts.
Who
of
knows what could be done?
Yeah, but I'm thinking we did a book by Robert Riley on music. And he took modern composers, or
Surprised by Beauty.
And I not being a musical listener too much, I wasn't. But when I read and listened to some of these composers of the 20th century, the 19th century, it was phenomenal, beautiful music.
Yes.
But
absolutely.
It didn't change the structure of music.
I'm not talking about changing the structure of anything.
No, but I'm just saying. So I mean, there may be. We're seeing in this book a progression of forms. Gregorian chant. And harmony, and then adding three voices, and then using instruments, and then a solo with a chorus, and so on. And so we've experimented with these forms. There may be some new forms out there, but I think possibly the creativity and the newness and the spontaneity and the genius will come from within those forms. Now, maybe here's a counterexample, though. I mean, I am with C.S. Lewis. He called himself the last medieval man. He didn't like T.S. Eliot's poetry. He does not like the kind of free verse type stuff. And I'm kind of, in my pedestrian way or Philistine way with him. But you look at Joe Hopkins. I mean, he has rhyme, and he has meter, and he has alliteration, but there's nothing before or after him that is
quite like him.
Yeah.
He does some very, very interesting things with his poetry. And
he breaks the rules of Renaissance metrics, but only by embracing the rules of Gregorian chant and the rhythm of speech and the rhythm of Anglo-Saxon and Gaelic poetry. So in other words, he's part of a tradition. He's just brought back to the tradition of things that have been neglected.
But we combine them in a way.
That's not to take away, Vivian. I'm agreeing with you. That's not to take away the genius, the unique individual genius, which is Jeremiah Hopkins.
That's right. That's right. And there will be more. There will be more unique geniuses out there who recombine things in unique ways. And so anyway, I'm not even looking at progress or development. I'm just saying the human capacity for creative genius is not going anywhere. And whether
it's alive.
It's
Thanks
alive.
God,
it's alive.
Yeah.
And it's both shaped by and contributes to culture. And culture has to be seen as a living, moving thing, not a static thing that you just stop here and say, I'm done now, and that's it. And there's that's not what that's not a living thing, that's a dead thing.
Okay, but what is our capacity to appreciate it? I mean, already history sifts out things. There's a lot of beautiful things that we don't even know about because only the greatest have come,
And things that get forgotten, like as we'll read here, Mendelssohn is the one who rediscovers Bach, who'd been forgotten because he was not considered that great at the time. And gosh, we all love Bach.
Well, Hopkins, not even published in his own lifetime because nobody understood him. So, obviously that's all part of this glorious picture of what it is to have a human culture, which is the image of God in us, is
right.
God the Creator in us.
One point I want to make is if I were born 1,000 years from now and had the same lifespan more or less, and so on, I could not assimilate what went on for the first 2,000 years of after Christ. I mean, I can't do it now.
Right. Well, and that's why
it's more than I can absorb.
That's right. It's more than you can absorb, which is why, the ancient Greeks had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plays.
Yeah.
And only a handful that we even know about today. And
I mean, basically, we have a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of which we actually we know of about 100, and most of us know about 10 of those. So that's where we're at. But this might be wishful thinking, and hopefully it's not bad theology. But my hope is that when we get to heaven, our capacity is exponentially increased.
I hope so.
Exactly. I mean, if we the fullness of our perfection as being made as in the image of God, in His presence, we are going to have an ability to just experience and enjoy the beauty of creation and the beauty of sub-creation in a way which this is just a shadow of what we'll be capable of then. Please God. To me, that's part of the beatific vision. And knowing all these missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle as well.
Yeah.
And do you think we'll all agree when we're there? Yes, we will. In all our diversity.
How could we not, since we're all beholding the truth in its fullness?
So, moving on to chapter 3.
Yeah, really, that was kind of digression.
But it was important digression. But I mean, chapter 1 and chapter 2 talked about basically the origins of Western music in Jewish psalmody and so on, and in Greek harmony and the 12-note scale and so on. And now we're moving forward. Actually, we jump over quite a few centuries here. Chapter 3, Illuminations, by which I think she means, Susan Treacy, the author, that taking the single tone of chant and then beginning to elaborate on it and
embroider it,
yeah. So,
yeah,
I just one thing which is not, it's really tangential, but on page 26, top of the page, she mentions Saint Ursula and her 11,000 virgin companions martyred at Cologne. Well, that's a legend in this sense. There were virgin martyrs in Cologne, but it was always puzzling because there were so few people in Cologne. How could you have 11,000 virgin martyrs? I mean, 11,000 virgins is already a problem, but but they actually, it was a question of Roman numerals. It was when the archaeologists found this out. I think it was 11 or something like that, or it was 11,000. There were virgin martyrs there, but it wasn't that many. That's totally irrelevant to the music part of this thing.
But I find it very helpful when these things get explained, because of course you stumble across something like that, you kind of just roll your eyes and move on, 11,000, okay. But I love it when Father...
Pious legends are pious legends, and I'm more than indulgent towards them, that's fine. Right. Actually, on the same page there at the bottom, just as it's one of the few pages I highlight on this page, it's about what Vivian was saying about development, right, of change in the good sense, innovation in the good sense. Very often, the range of Hildegard's melodies span an octave and a fourth or fifth, exceeding that of the typical Gregorian chant. Now, although I don't know what that means, what she is saying, of course, is that Hildegard of Bingen is doing some innovative things with music and taking things that step further than Gregorian chant and
pushing the boundaries.
Pushing the boundaries. That's right.
The envelope.
Pushing the envelope.
What going to say, Vivian?
Well, I'm just so glad that Hildegard makes an appearance in this book, because as she points out toward the end, she's one of these figures who gets used by different people with different sets of agendas. Yeah. And will the real Hildegard von Bingen please stand up? And so, but what was so interesting was to learn, like, how did she even become anybody? And what you realize is that she sent her writings to Saint Bernard, who wasn't Saint Bernard at the time, but Bernard of Clairvaux, and the Pope Eugenius III ended up hearing of her. And as soon as some of these larger than life figures at the time heard of her, what happens to her? She becomes something of a celebrity throughout Europe. Her advice was sought by people of all stations of life, including the Emperor Frederick of Barbarossa. Kind of like a Catherine of Siena, or these hidden women. They're living a hidden life. She's cloistered. She's a mystic. She has extraordinary experiences, but she also writes music and writes poetry. And
what is good is that that as soon as a talent such as that is recognized, it's universally accepted by the patriarchy, if we want to call it that, right? Is that they don't say, well, this is a woman, let's not listen to her. On the contrary, this is clearly a highly gifted follower of Christ who's doing very, very beautiful things. Let's listen to her.
Right, and the Catholic Church, just like Joseph and I, is pro-women. I want another.
As Chesterton would correct you, Father, you need to say pro-woman. He says only a blackguard speaks of women.
Really?
But I was more concerned with Father saying Joseph and I is. That was my concern.
Well, this is
pro-woman.
Another sidebar thing, because we talked about Bernard of Clairvaux, this wonderful saint. I just saw, I believe it's true, that the French government, who actually owns these things, is selling some monasteries in France, one of which is Clairvaux.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
So any of our watchers or listeners want to join with us? If that's for sale,
wow,
we want to buy it.
You bet.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow.
All right.
Well, chapter 4, if I can just say one thing I liked about chapter 4 is it's secular, but I think secular in the best sense. This is the music of non-sacred music, right? There's a whole history of non-sacred music, and as I've confessed many times, I've actually highlighted loads of this, which I have no time for. I've confessed many times that I am ignorant of music. But back in England, I used to listen to Radio 3, BBC Radio 3, which is the classical music channel. And I'd be working and it'd be in the background. But occasionally something would come on that would grab my attention. And I'd stop working and I would listen. And the first time I heard music from the Red Book of Montserrat, which is mentioned here on page 34 onwards, it was wonderful because it was sacred, but it was profane. In the sense, it clearly wasn't meant for the liturgy. It wasn't meant for, should we say, formal worship. But it was an outpouring of a love, mostly for the Blessed Virgin, in these songs that were very jolly. It's like almost a joyful folk tune. But it's an honor of the Blessed Virgin, and that juxtaposition. I find was very Merry England, right? It's very holly jolly Christmas. It's that we are allowed to have fun while actually adoring and venerating, and that's what I love about good secular music, of which I think the Red Book of Montserrat is the epitome. So that's what I loved about this particular chapter.
Well, those pilgrim songs, though, I wouldn't exactly call that. I mean, a lot of the troubadour music was very naughty. And we also know that the whole romantic love movement, if you want to call it that, in the circles of the nobility and the courts and so on, was also very naughty. And so
Not arguing for that.
Yeah,
I'm just arguing for the red book.
So I mean, a lot of body songs and body, and so
body and body.
Yeah, exactly. And so she kind of passes over this a little bit. I think.
Well, to be fair to her, I think it's because it's not the music of Christendom, right?
It certainly is.
So she's not. She has obviously accentuated the positive.
Well, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing.
I know.
To have drinking songs and bar songs and so on. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but the whole business of courtly romantic love, I mean, led to all kinds of adultery. And I mean, this is what Guinevere and Lancelot, and I mean, she kind of just passes over that. And it is the music of Christendom. Absolutely it is, because it's trying to reconcile the married state, which at these levels of society was strictly about property and title and all of that. And now what does Eros have to do with that? How does married love and erotic love, how do they come together? And, there's good combinations and not so good combinations, and there's music for all of it. And so,
she doesn't totally avoid that, in the sense that at least 2, if not 3 of these famous troubadours wrote this music, committed adultery with the queen or the duchess.
That's right.
But then ended up in they became Cistercian monks.
Good for them. I hope they're wearing their hair shirt still.
Right. It shows that maybe that Eros can lead to agape.
Yes, it can.
As God bless Pope Benedict, his first encyclical on Deus Caritas.
That's right.
He begins with Plato and erotic love and saying this can be purified.
Absolutely. In fact, that's what his whole von Balthasaur's Glory of the Lord is about, basically. No, that's right. But the fact that there is this tension, this conflict, how do these things get reconciled, and so on. And that whole troubadour tradition and the courtly love tradition.
And she does also mention that the troubadours that are in hell or purgatory.
In Dante,
I love her interaction with the Divine Comedy in this as well.
Yes.
There's very little music in hell, but there's quite a bit in purgatory. So I think that's where she really addresses it, right? Is that music can. I mean, what I was reminded of is something that friend Susanna said in Steubenville. They were all laughing at something, whatever it was, something, bawdy or whatever. And one of them said, "Well, I don't think that I'm going to get to heaven, so I don't find that funny." Right? So the point is, there's an element, humor. If you're laughing, you're feeling guilty, there's a problem, right?
Yeah,
that's why the humor of Chesterton is so wonderful.
Well, and
you laugh with Chesterton without feeling guilty, right?
The figure who really fits in here too, of course, is Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales, because they are on pilgrimage, and they are telling stories both lofty and not so lofty all at the same time, right? And so I think that's a good image for what this kind of music was all about. There's both the high praise of the lady love, it's a chaste relationship, and then the devotion to Our Lady that came out of these songs. And then there was, we used to be chaste and something happened. Okay.
Well,
Father, we've done very well. We've managed to get through 2 chapters. So. We had an extremely good conversation.
On January 3rd of 2022, God willing, that we will begin moving from monophony to polyphony. And who was it that said about the Catholic Church, here comes everybody? Was that?
Oh,
James Joyce, yeah. And so that's it. The body and the beautiful, the chaste and the not so chaste, and so on.
The profane, the sacred.
Well, God bless you all. Have a wonderful Christmas. And we will see you and talk to you and continue discussing this book on January 3rd from the Forum Book Club.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumbookclub.ignatius.com.